no need to feel down. I said, young man, pick yourself off the ground. I said, young man, cause you're in a new town. There's no need to be.
What's up, guys? It's Benny. Mommy and Daddy are fighting. This one's gonna hurt. The internet is raging at Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and roasting them for saying that Jeffrey Epstein 100% committed suicide. Kash Patel and FBI determines Abraham Lincoln killed himself. L1B article right now. This all stems from an interview that they did this past weekend with Maria Bartiromo, where they both said this.
You said Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. People don't believe it.
Well, I mean, listen, they have a right to their opinion, but as someone who has worked as a public defender, as a prosecutor, who's been in that prison system, who's been in the Metropolitan Detention Center, who's been in segregated housing, you know a suicide when you see one, and that's what that was.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file. He killed himself.
So people are going viral for posting Bongino before and after becoming FBI deputy director. This video, for instance, has nearly 5 million views, 31,000 likes, 7,000 saves, and 7.3 thousand reposts, 7,000 comments. What do you think happened to Dan Bongino, says Luke Radowski. Here's the video.
Listen, that Jeffrey Epstein story is a big deal. Please do not let that story go. Keep your eye on this. Catherine Rumler, we need to keep the heat on this case, folks. There are a lot of people who are knee deep in the Washington swamp who are not telling you the truth about serious allegations out there that Epstein may have had video and audio of people out there doing things they shouldn't have been doing. And you should be asking yourself the question, how is it that all these people, the CIA director, the Obama fixer, Bill Clinton, all intersected paths with Jeffrey Epstein? Jeffrey Epstein isn't with us anymore, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. Outside of a few entrepreneurial media outlets saying, hey, this is a big deal.
He killed himself. You want me to? I've seen the whole file.
Okay. So now it's not just shit posters on the internet coming after Kash and Dan. Now it's Jeffrey Epstein's own brother. His name's Mark Epstein. And he has an exclusive op-ed saying, well, this isn't true. And now Kash and Dan are part of a cover-up. All right, we're going to try and cover this fairly. I've explained my priors with Kash and Dan. Kash is a regular on our program. And Dan Bongino, I consider somewhat of a mentor in this space. And I'm going to set all of that aside and explain how we think we may have potentially cracked the case with an exclusive interview that we just did with Epstein's lawyer, where both the internet that believes that there's a much broader conspiracy and those inside of running the FBI who are just looking directly at the evidence before us may be able to come to the same conclusion. Okay, so please let us cook here. We're going to give you we're going to give you everything. Brutal and hard truths are the most important ones. Let's just establish here that Mark Epstein is somebody who's appeared on Tucker's programming before. He's been constantly searching for the truth about his brother's death. Mark Epstein has appeared on credible news sources. He is a real person. He does believe that Bill Barr covered up the death of his brother, and that there's a much broader conspiracy afoot here. Mark Epstein discussed Michael Baden's assessment of Jeffrey Epstein's death. Not a hanging, not a suicide. I mean, this was 60 Minutes interviewing some pretty famous people and some really credible people who do autopsies in New York, saying there's no way that this was a suicide. So again, Mark Epstein is a deeply credible source here. Let's go. Jeffrey Epstein's brother has eviscerated Trump's FBI director, Kash Patel, for stating that his death was a suicide, despite that being the official ruling. The pedophile's brother, Mark Epstein, told the Daily Mail that Patel wasn't there and didn't see the body. He didn't see the autopsy. He has no idea what he's effing talking about. Fighting words. It's a lot easier for me if I thought it was a suicide. And there's a long list of things that point away from it, he added, including Ghislaine Maxwell, who's on tape, on camera, saying from prison it wasn't a suicide. You'd think she'd know, but let's go ahead and read. The row comes as Patel and FBI director upset conspiracy theorists on Sunday, giving their verdict on Epstein's death. They sat down with Marie Bartiromo. During the interview, Bartiromo said, you said the Epstein was a suicide. People don't believe it. Patel says everybody has a right to their opinion. Bongino confirmed, I've seen the whole file. He killed himself. I've reviewed the case. There's no evidence in the case file suggesting otherwise. But Epstein's brother, Mark, counts himself as one of the many who believe that Patel and Bongino are wrong, and he was murdered. His rationale is multiple, including having personally brought and tested a bed sheet similar to the one used by Epstein in the Metropolitan Correctional Center. Epstein was found hanging by a bed sheet with his buttocks an inch off the cell floor and his feet extended in front of him. He was awaiting trial on sex trafficking charges. Mark claims that though through his own testing, using weights similar to his brother's body, he's found that the bedsheet could not have possibly supported Epstein's corpse. I don't think that the sheet could have held his weight. It would have torn. These sheets are like toilet paper. They're very, very thin. Pointing to issues with security cameras in the Metropolitan Correctional Center, 2 cameras trained on Epstein's cell were not properly working. So Bill Barr came out and said he personally viewed the video and nobody went in or out of the tier. When I heard this, I said this was a cover-up. There are 6 levels of security in that prison before you get to that tier, he claimed. But there were 11 or 12 inmates on that tier. They would have to go in or out of the tier to kill somebody in their cell. Supposedly, cell doors were left locked. There's your answer. Somebody could have gotten into Jeff's cell to kill him. I believe they meant to write unlocked there, but maybe this has to do with the guards. Mark added that the initial death certificate cause recorded as pending further study before quickly being changed to suicide. If you ask a pathologist, it takes weeks before you get an answer. What further study was done in those few days that led to the determination? Mark also claimed that his brother was clean-shaven in the autopsy photograph. Shaving happened on Friday at the prison. Epstein was found on Saturday morning. But he was hairy, Mark said. He would have had more stubble. So Mark alleges Epstein must have died hours earlier. Mark also claims that there is no lividity, skin discoloration that occurs due to the setting of blood after death on Epstein's legs or buttocks. Instead, he says it was only present on his upper back. That's startling. The blood would not have traveled up to his back. Mark believes that his brother was killed for what he knew and what he had on people. In 2016 election, I asked him casually who he thought would win. Mark recalled his brother. He said he didn't know, but if I said what I knew about both candidates, they'd have to cancel the election, he said. Wow, goodness gracious. So President Trump has shared his own skepticism about Epstein's death for years, and before taking office, he promised to release all the documents. We still await that. All right. So let's begin here. I wanted to give Jeffrey Epstein's brother, obviously, full ability to talk through what he believes happened to his brother. And I want to show you that there are some, again, credible people that have done credible work on this that are saying, I don't believe it. I don't believe what Kash and Dan are doing, even from their own side, from the right. Here's Glenn Beck saying Kash Patel and Dan Bongino now claim that Epstein's death was a suicide. They didn't used to believe that. I don't believe it. I know Bongino. He's a credible guy. He loves his country. But in order for me to believe Epstein killed himself, the FBI must produce the full unredacted forensic autopsy reports, the surveillance footage, and sworn testimony from neutral parties. The entire timeline of that camera, the video leading up to it, going out, the exact moment it turned off, why it broke, and why the most high-profile prisoner in America was removed from suicide watch just days before. Most of all, what changed Patel and Bongino's mind? I'd really like to say, I totally agree with this. Why, the American public can take it. If there is evidence proving this, just out with it, right? Out with it. We've all seen everything from 9/11 to October 7th attacks, right? They're far more gruesome here, says Cernovich. They're readily available all over the internet. As are the videos from Gaza. We can handle seeing proof that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. Kash and Bongino are men of great character. They should release the entire file and the images and the videos. Just out with it, right? If that's the case, then do it. There's a ton of pushback right now. Do you believe them? People are asking. Various accounts that, of course, are big backers of the right are now calling to cancel Bongino and Kash. I'm not agreeing with that, by the way. I'm just saying that this is creating quite a bit of a stir. And I would like to present some new information that potentially will lead us to a conclusion where maybe both sides can agree. I don't know. Let's begin with Tucker Carlson, the only person who's really truly investigated this from a seat of absolute authority on his most popular nightly show on Fox News, when he devoted weeks of investigation to the Jeffrey Epstein saga. And with his entire phalanx of a research team was able to discover this. It's very interesting.
Came in or out of the tier, Barr said. Therefore, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. So let's consider that claim rationally. On the night of August 9th, Jeffrey Epstein was being held in the special housing unit of the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan, the most secure part of the city's federal lockup. It would be physically impossible for a stranger to get in and out of this facility without an electronic pass and without being seen by the countless cameras in place between the street and the locked 9th floor of the building. So if Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, he was not murdered by an intruder, someone who came into the tier. He was murdered by someone on his own cell block, obviously. There were 7 other cells on Epstein's tier, and each one housed dangerous criminals. So if you were looking for a killer, you would figure out who was in those cells. But no one seems to have thought of that or done it. The Bureau of Prisons refused to provide us with a list of the inmates on Epstein's tier. It's not clear how many of them were even interviewed by investigators, despite the fact that some of them were transferred out of the facility shortly after Epstein's death. That's a baffling oversight. Instead, Attorney General Bill Barr simply assured the country that no one from outside came into Jeffrey Epstein's tier and declared the case solved. And if you think about it, that is a remarkable way to assess a potential crime scene, especially when you consider the source. Bill Barr was not a civilian or a crime novel aficionado. He was the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. He was the nation's top cop. His job was to solve crimes. And yet somehow, with all his law enforcement experience, it never seemed to dawn on Bill Barr that if there was a killer, the killer would have come from one of the cells on Epstein's tier. And then further, apparently, no one in the entire FBI suggested this to Bill Barr as they reviewed the case. Excuse me, Mr. Attorney General. It doesn't matter what the camera outside the tier shows. What matters is what happened inside the tier.
Well, okay, let's make a really quick forensic assessment of what happened to Jeffrey Epstein. What we absolutely know, which is how Jeffrey Epstein died. Jeffrey Epstein died by having his neck snapped. Let's listen to the doctor, shall we? Trust the science. My PhD is in pathology and toxicology. I performed autopsies. I know enough about anatomy to know that a slump hanging is not going to fracture the hyoid bone into 3 pieces. Epstein did not kill himself. He was strangled by a very strong man. This indicates we have a huge problem. Others saying anomaly around Epstein hanging himself. Epstein was found hanging himself in his cell despite being on suicide watch. His cellmate was transferred the morning of his death, leaving Epstein alone. The prison staff failed to check on him every 30 minutes. Malfunctioning security cameras, both guards asleep, the fracture in Epstein's bones, his neck bones, which some experts say is more consistent with strangulation. Those experts, by the way, are out on tape saying, yes, this is what happened. Jeffrey Epstein was strangled to death.
Dr. Michael Baden, who participated, was present at the autopsy, has participated in over 1,000 autopsies of prison deaths.
I have never seen 3 fractures like this in a suicidal hanging. Going over 1,000 jail hangings, suicides in the New York City state prisons over the past 40, 50 years, no one had 3 fractures.
His fairly firm conclusion is that this was not a suicide. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. He was holding off on that determination, pending determination of how the body was found, which we finally, now that they say the way the body was found, it just only shows that it was not that way. The autopsy shows it's not that way, which further convinced Dr. Bodden that this was not a hanging.
So again, very strange. The experts are saying, well, the way that his body was sitting, the way that he was positioned, and the breaks in his neck are completely consistent with a strangulation. The noose around Epstein's neck had no blood on it. Epstein had access to other means of self-harm, but he used a very inefficient method. The death scene was disturbed immediately by prison staff. The cell was likely cleaned and reused, destroying potential evidence. So who was with Epstein in his cell? Who were the people who were around Jeffrey Epstein inside the? So if Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, if Jeffrey Epstein was simply found dead in his cell, then who was there? Epstein. If Epstein killed himself, it was assisted suicide. Epstein's cellmate, an ex-cop, convicted of killing 4 people. Former police officer Nicholas Tarleone, who once shared a cell with Epstein, was found guilty of gangland-style murders. Here is Jeffrey Epstein's cellmate. Just going to let this one hang for a second. The doctor, all the smart people, all the smart doctors who literally assess prison murders say he was strangled to death, that someone broke his bones in his neck. They were so strong that they broke the bones in his neck. And just this guy happened, a strangler, this is what this guy does professionally. He's convicted of being a murderous strangler. This guy was the Epstein prison cellmate. Got it. Okay. Here's all I'm trying to say here. Don't ever, Bongino posts all the time. He says, hold me accountable. Don't ever insulate me from criticism, right? Okay. Could we potentially have a situation where someone was paid from inside of the prison to kill Epstein? Where someone was paid off, where someone was used inside of the cell to kill Epstein? Even according to Tucker Carlson's reporting, it would be impossible, based on the way the prison system was set up, to have some type of kill team ushered into the prison. You'd see it. That's according to Tucker, not us. So doesn't it stand to reason that if evil people, or if Jeffrey Epstein himself wanted to die, that you would just have someone from inside of the cell block go into his cell and kill him? And that's what we asked Jeffrey Epstein's former lawyer, Alan Dershowitz, on the program. And what he said was, yeah, that's what I think happened. Because the entire internet was pretty shocked when Kash Patel and Dan Bongino said, no, he definitely killed himself in the prison cell. And you're saying that that you believe that this was possible. You have been a skeptic about the official Epstein story for a long time.
Have been. I'm not a skeptic about the fact that he didn't do it alone. He could not have simply killed himself alone. If he killed himself, it was with the assistance of some guards. And some guards have been disciplined for turning off their videos and for other actions that allowed him to kill himself. But it wouldn't surprise me if somebody managed to get into the prison and kill him, because I don't understand what his motive would have been. He could have killed himself at any time. And if he was going to be let out on bail, then why would he kill himself? So I've always had my doubts, my questions, but it's certainly plausible that he may have killed himself.
Dershowitz would go on in our program to say that it makes a lot of sense that someone from the inside killed him. So maybe is perhaps that what's happening here? Yes, there is evidence that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, meaning there wasn't a kill squad that was sent into the prison. You look at all the cameras and everything, nobody went into the prison. Just happens to be a murderer was locked up in the same cell as Jeffrey Epstein, or in the same cell block, and that murderer was allowed, they flipped the lights off, that murderer was allowed to just, maybe turn on turn on the TV pretty loudly, flip the button that unlocks all the doors, and they just go murder Epstein. Dershowitz tells us maybe Epstein paid for that. Maybe Epstein wanted to die, and instead of going to the trial, maybe there's an agreement where Jeffrey Epstein just takes care of the problem because he knows too much. I don't know. I wasn't Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, right? After all. But this is what Tucker's saying. Tucker says it would be impossible to access Jeffrey Epstein's tier, so it had to come from the inside. And the Department of Corrections and the FBI and the DOJ did 0 interviews with any of the other cellmates. That really seems like a logical story. So it's kind of like, well, release all the evidence then and let people come to their own conclusions. That's the easiest possible way out here. Release it all. I mean, don't oogle it yourself. Release it all, right? And then you solve all the problems, and the American public can take it. They don't have to look at it if they don't want to. And then you let people, you don't torture his family or, Mark Epstein or whatever. You don't cause further damage to the FBI or anybody who's trying to conceal this information. You just out with it. The American public can take it. And I think that really stands to reason. And then maybe the conclusion is that he did kill himself, but that he paid another prisoner to do it. That he had someone go in and strangle him. So maybe it was a suicide, but it was an assisted suicide. And that kind of makes sense, actually. When you think about it, that does make sense. Punch your ticket, get out of jail free card. Maybe that's part of the agreement, right, that he had. Just a thought. Just a thought. But what do I know? I don't have access to this stuff. We're just trying to have a meeting of the minds, right? Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think happened to Jeffrey Epstein? I firmly believe he didn't kill himself. But I believe that assisted suicide could have been, that actually makes a lot of sense if you break it all down. Maybe that was part of it. I just want to propose that. Let me know in the comment section. It's your boy Benny. See ya.